initially wrote it because of the visceral reaction I had when I heard the news that Neil passed. And it sounds crazy because this is somebody I never met. Um, but that is the impact he had on so many people. And I knew at that moment that whatever I was feeling was what millions of people around the world were also feeling.
Cathy, Ken, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, it's so cool to get a chance to chat with you, particularly because I was just listening to the new single. But I want to tease my listeners because they're not going to get a chance to hear a clip from that until later on in the episode. But I want to dig into the past. I'm always curious to find out about the origin story, the superhero origin story of creative people, how you guys got into music as well. And Cathy, I'll start with you because I believe you have grandparents and a sister as well. Like this is a musical family you come from, right?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a great question because actually, I don't think anybody's asked that yet. Um, I grew up, my grandfather was a big band musician, and he played multiple instruments by ear, mainly a saxophone player, but he played clarinet, flute, all the woodwinds, and piano. And my grandmother, who he married, was a violinist. And of course, she kind of gave that up when they got married. She had the kids, and he actually would travel. And I found recently my mom showed me a little musician's handbook that he would carry with him, and he'd write down the city he was in, the gig he was doing, how much he got paid. And I mean, it was like $5 back then
Yeah.
that they would get paid, but he was very proud of that. But he worked with a lot of those really well-known big band singers that would come into these big dinner shows and banquet halls and things. So that was kind of my first exposure to music. And I loved it. I would sit and listen to him. He had a little music room with his music stand, and I would sit and play with all the instruments. And I actually played flute when I was in grade school. And I loved singing, but I was shy about it. Fast forward to high school, my sister, she was always musically inclined too, and she loved the drums. And so she became a drummer in a female heavy metal original band here in town that was called Whiskey Blue. And they actually became pretty popular and had a radio hit and won like best band in Arizona. So I would tag along to all her shows. And that's how and I loved rock. I mean, I was just a rock girl. And of course, I had already gotten into Rush. And so that's kind of how I got into the music scene in the 80s. And but I had also been into theater and acting since I was little, and I knew I wanted to do that. I just didn't have the confidence about the music part of things. Um, for whatever reason, I went acting first and started that career, and it was a really strange coincidence. I was doing a film kind of early on in my career with a few name actors in it, and I had to do a singing scene where I had to actually go to a studio, record an original composition that somebody had written for the movie, and I had to perform it on set in front of like 150, actors, crew, cast, everything. And I was so nervous, and I had to sing along to my recording and improvise this whole scene. And I was scared, but I had to do it for the character. So it was kind of a great way to get over those nerves. And it was after that I was just hooked, and I was like, I just need to go for it. I love singing. I've always wanted to do it. And so that's what transitioned me into actually trying to pursue it.
And you had worked with a few different cover bands, right? Over the years?
It was that movie first that got me to working with a few musician friends here in Arizona.
Yeah.
And once I did that is when I went and auditioned for this cover band Superhero that I'm still with today. It's been 11 years now. And I auditioned for them and did not get the job at first. They didn't call me.
Right.
I thought, I suck. Like maybe I shouldn't do this. And I just left it alone. And then I think it was right before Christmas, they called me and they're like, hey, we 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 liked you. We just already had somebody committed and she got fired. And they're like, can you come do a Christmas show with us? And I didn't know any of their material and I had to do a Christmas show, just scared to death. And that's how I got in the band. So,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah.
So you had done acting prior to the musical career, but then you seem to have done the musical stuff for the last 11 years, right? Doing the cover bands and traveling
Yeah.
and playing with them, but then also hosting various events and like sort of the actor slash host. I don't know what do you call that role?
Pretty much that, actor slash host. That's
Okay, all right, cool. And then
exactly what it says on my resume.
it does it. Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah,
So I guess I'm curious about the difference because there's an energy when you're on stage, and the energy when you're performing as a musician when you're singing, and the energy when you're introducing. Now I got to see you in action live on stage at Bubba Bash in 2024 as the host, where
yes.
you're getting the audience excited for what they're going to hear. What's the difference between that and the being the thing that they're there to hear?
That's a great question. So for me, I actually do not like live hosting that much, and I get asked to do it a lot, and it
You're a
petrifies.
natural. It doesn't show at all.
I know people think that, but I'm actually very, very shy. And so I really have to push myself out of my comfort zone to do live hosting. I'm really great on camera because it's just me and the camera.
Right, right.
A live audience is different when you're hosting, but music wise, it's totally different because when you're singing, to me, it's almost like you're playing a character. So again, I don't feel as self-conscious when I'm singing because you go out there and people are excited and the feedback is immediate and they're singing the words to the songs and the music brings it all together. Whereas when you're hosting, you have to go out there and just be yourself. And it's very intimidating when you walk out and an audience is just sitting there staring at you and there's no expression, there's no noise, there's no music giving you that energy, and they're just waiting for you to say something, and it better be good.
I never
So
thought of it that way. Wow. Okay.
it's intimidating, and so because you don't know whether you should try to be funny or you don't know. And I'm not a person who likes to be scripted, so I go out and just wing it. And you kind of never know what's going to happen with that, but it usually works out. I think we're our own worst critics, so we're probably in our head about it more than what other people are thinking in the audience, but that's just human nature.
I never would have guessed that had you not told me that at all. Having
Yeah.
seen you in action, I would never would have guessed that. I
Well, I
guess there's
appreciate that because believe me, I have like moments of panic to do it.
Thank you. How about you, Ken? I'm just going to flip the pretty much similar question in terms of I know you do a lot of work behind the scenes and producing and working with artists and stuff like that. How comfortable are you when in front of people?
Well, I tour with, I don't know, I guess you might not know my background, but I've toured with Alice Cooper, had my own band on RCA called House of Lords. I've done tons of touring with Flotsam and Jetsam, which is a band I'm currently in. And, we play massive festivals in Europe like Grass Pop that are, 80,000 people. And, so I honestly, if I'm going to answer that, I'm super comfortable
Yeah.
with playing live. That is not a problem. Now, if I had to do what Cathy does and host a show, that would make me nervous too. I would be
Okay.
like, how y'all doing tonight?
Doesn't matter the size of the crowd, it's the action you're doing on stage. So when you're performing a song in a group, that's fine. But when you're yeah, okay, all right, fair enough.
Well, there's a lot going on. Like when you're
Yeah,
performing, especially what I do. I'm a drummer, so I think what Cathy does. She's a lead singer, so that to me is I think it's much more difficult than any other member of the band because like it or not, everyone is going to immediately look at the singer, and
right.
that's the first thing they're going to see. It's the first thing they're going to hear. And so, being the drummer, it's like for me, unless something's really going wrong on stage, it's really not that I don't get nervous. I don't ever really worry about anything.
Right.
But if I were to host something, yeah, that's a whole different animal. And I understand what Kathy's saying. So I think she's, absolutely spot on with that. When you
Awesome.
just have to go out there and start talking and people are just going,
Yeah.
okay.
And
Yeah.
you're sitting there going, I'm behind the drum kit. I'm good. I'm cool.
Yeah, although he's being very humble because he's quite the drummer. And if you go watch videos of Ken, he's he's one of those rare drummers that's kind of a show in himself. Like
Right.
he's pretty amazing. So people are watching you, Ken, not to make you nervous.
All right. So Ken, let's get your superhero origin story, how you got into the to being a musician and a producer and all the things that you do.
Okay, well, just to clarify, I'm not in superhero, but I actually served as producer and co-writer on Kathy's song.
Right.
So just to clarify, what my involvement
Oh, so
is.
yeah, I meant superhero, not in the name of the band, but in the sort
Oh,
of
you're calling
Marvel
me a
superhero
superhero.
origin
I like
story.
that. If you want to call us, call me a
Change his mind
superhero, I'm
now.
okay. Oh, well, how I got started, I mean, it's really well, it's not really that interesting. I've heard a lot of drummers say this that they didn't choose the instrument chose them. And I'm really one of those stories. When I was a kid, when I was going into kindergarten and in grade school, I was always banging on the desk with pencils and pens, and teachers were annoyed and having to take them away. So when you got into junior high and they said, "What instrument would you like to play?" It was almost like, "You're kidding, right? Like, I'm going to play drums." Like, duh. So, it was a very natural thing, and I did seem to have like some sort of natural ability that was maybe a little bit different from some of the other kids. But at the same time, I really loved it and I enjoyed playing, and it was never work for me. Nobody ever had to say, "Hey, can you go practice?" And by the time I was in high school, I was in every band you can think of. I was in jazz band, stage band, marching band, orchestra. I even had a class called music workshop, I think, where I just went and practiced for like 40 minutes or something like that, and you get credit for it. So that it was just a love of music, and I also played in a rock, like my high school band Fifth Angel. We ended up getting signed to Epic Records, which is a whole other story. But basically, that's really my start. Was just through the different bands, through the educational system, and then having my own rock band that I guess it's considered a metal band, but
Right.
that actually ended up doing some damage.
So, oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I hadn't even heard that story that you did all that when you were, I mean, I had heard little bits of it, but that's interesting that because I remember my sister was kind of the same way where she would take coat hangers and play on her mattress because she just always had to be having something where she was fiddling with her hands. And that's how, it's like you said, the drums chose you.
How did that, work as a musician? How did that transition into, the studio you manage now as well?
Well, it was a very natural progression. Fortunately, I was blessed to work with some of the greatest like engineers and producers on the planet. Guys like Mike Tachi, who did the Metallica Black album, Michael Wagner, who mixed Megadeth, worked with Ozzy Osbourne. I was actually in the mix down for Ozzy Osbourne, No More Tears. That's another story.
Oh,
But
wow.
there's so many great producers. Andy Johns, who worked on a couple of small bands like Led Zeppelin and Van Halen. So I worked alongside these incredible engineers and producers, and so I started to learn like where the bar is for excellence.
Right,
And,
right.
and I was always frustrated with my own music, wanting to be able to create what I wanted to create when I wanted to create it, and not be tied to having somebody be there that was necessary for me to do this. And so it started out, funny enough, on my first Alice Cooper tour. I met a guy named Kip Winger, who is still one of my good friends to this day, and he sold 4 million albums worldwide or something like that. And so he was always telling me, yeah, you have to write, you have to record, you have to get into this. He was a little older than me, and so I ended up buying this 4-track cassette recorder, and then it's sort of over the years morphed into what you see behind me, which is an SSL console, full Pro Tools rig, like every item and mic imaginable, and so that's where it all started for me. Is basically Kip kind of pushing me towards, learn to write your own songs, learn to record your own songs, and then working with some amazing producers that really took me under the wing. Like Michael Wagner used to bring me in and have me listen to what he was doing and show me what the routing was. And, he taught a lot of guys, actually, a guy named Garth that went on to produce multi-platinum bands. I'm just blanking on some of the names. I think Trapped was one of them. But anyways, Michael taught a bunch of engineers that Bill Kennedy, who I worked with on Megadeth's The World Needs a Hero album. I was one of the guys that helped on the engineering with that. And Bill Kennedy was also taught by Michael Wagner. So if you look at Michael Wagner, he sort of was the teacher, I think, for a lot of famous engineers and producers. So, he's a great friend and taught me a tremendous amount about what I know, along with everybody else that I worked with. I mean, I also worked with a guy named Mac, who worked with a small band called Queen. So, I was really fortunate to be able to work alongside some of these. Oh, Terry Brown, who worked on Rush, by the way, and I am wearing a Rush shirt, just so everybody knows.
I'm the only one who's not wearing one today. It's
Yeah.
me.
You
Yeah.
didn't get the memo. You didn't get the memo, Mark.
So
So
Oh man, I did not get the memo. Shame on me, and I have so many of them just in the closet over there. All right, so now that we've established the two superheroes and their separate origin stories, I'm always curious as to how did your paths cross in terms of starting to collaborate?
well, you want to take that, Cathy?
Sure. I can actually, John Bronson, who Mark, you met when we did Bubba Bash, he has known Ken 30 years or something, Ken and his wife. And he called me one day, and I knew of Ken because, like, my sister's a drummer, so she's a big fan of his. And I think I followed him on social media. And John just called me out of the blue one day and said, "Hey, Ken has a new Fifth Angel album and he needs somebody to interview him. Would you interview him?" And I said, "Sure." So we got in touch and we went down to Ken's studio right there and we did an interview. And it was about his double platinum album, which is fantastic, by the way. And we just clicked, and I was wearing actually a very similar shirt to what Ken's got on right now, the periodic table that says Rush. And we got to talking about Rush being an influence for both of us. And Ken was working on some stuff that was related to that. And he said, "Oh, let's chat about that a little bit." And from there, I don't know, we got to emailing back and forth because I kind of helped him out with something on the back end of the interview. And he, in return, Ken's such a gracious person. He said, "If there's anything I could ever do to help you." And so I said, and again, this is kind of out of my nature because I'm usually pretty shy about stuff, but I thought, well, I'm just gonna go for it in this one instance. And I emailed him back and I said, "Yeah, there is something you could help me with. I've written some poems. I don't call them songs because they were not in the right format, but I have written poetry my whole life since I was a kid. Simple stuff. Like, you're a writer, Mark. My stuff is probably so simple." But I told him I'd like him to look at it and just let me know if I should just keep it to myself, if it's not worth doing anything with. And he was really encouraging in his response back. And he liked a couple of the things I'd written. And he said, "Hey, if you wanted me to produce one of these, I'm glad to help you out. Which one would it be?" And I had this particular poem that, I'm not going to lie, it was my favorite. And it was the one I was hoping he would want to work on. And I had written it for Neil when Neil passed away. And I literally had sat down and wrote that poem in probably about 5 to 10 minutes. The basic poem came out, and then I would go back and tweak things. And so that's how that happened. We literally started working on it at that point, and everything just sort of evolved organically, which I feel when things fall into place like that, that it's meant to be. It's meant to happen. That person was placed in your life for a reason, and uh, it's just the best way for something to unfold is when you're not forcing it and it's just happening naturally. So.
Wow, that's amazing. You said you wrote the song. So the song you're talking about is Now You've Gone, and you can't help, a Rush fan can't help but pick up on some Easter eggs or some nods or some references. Were those really in the first draft, or did that come in a little bit later? I'm always curious about that creative process.
Great question. Actually, no, when I wrote it, because I initially wrote it because of the visceral reaction I had when I heard the news that Neil passed. And it sounds crazy because this is somebody I never met. Um, but that is the impact he had on so many people. And I knew at that moment that whatever I was feeling was what millions of people around the world were also feeling. So that's what made me write it. So I specifically had Neil in mind.
Right.
And so I did put in some of the specific lyrics that you're talking about that kind of are a play on words of songs that Neil had written. I put those in there in the beginning, from the beginning. I think I might have tweaked the ghostwriter line a little bit later. That might have come later, but from the beginning, those lyrics were pretty much what you see now.
Right.
Ken helped massage that a little to make it work musically. And we would go back and forth about certain lyrics and words and what worked and what didn't. But yeah, it was pretty much in the very first iteration of the poem.
And Ken, I'm curious about that. Similar, what was done with the lyrical allusions to Neil's work is that there's elements of the song itself, particularly towards the end, as the band is having fun. It seems like they're having fun, and then doing these little nods to Rush. I imagine you had a hand in that, right?
Yeah, sure. But it was definitely, something that we all, the chemistry. I just think the chemistry of everybody working together is really kind of what made all that happen. And
Yeah.
I think, when you say, were the Easter eggs always there? I think, as far as the lyrics, certainly they were there in the first draft for sure. Musically, I think, we almost cut out the whole progressive ending part, and which would have really been unfortunate. And one of the main reasons we were going to cut it out is originally we used a couple of just riffs from, and not chords, not really melodies, but just instrumental riffs from certain songs. And then I kind of like telling the story, so Cathy went ahead and sent our first draft to Rush's publisher and said, "Hey, do you mind if we use these little clips?" And they're like, "Absolutely not. You cannot use in any way, shape, or form any of this." And so we were like, "Oh, this is horrible," because they were definitely nice little Easter eggs that reminded you of how great the band was
Yeah.
and how much you miss them, which is really part of the song too. Just that kind of release where you hear it and you're going, "Wow, those guys were so amazing." And that's something we wanted to put in the song. So we had to revise our riffs and make them sound sort of like them, but
Yeah.
not them, and which was no easy task. But I think it worked out really great in the end. Now we did leave that long section, the ending
Yeah.
section that really I think kind of helps the listener, just brings you back to the fact that wow, these guys were so amazing, and I think it is very moving. It's even moving for me, and as a producer, and I've talked about this before, where after I hear a song, 200 times working on it, because, you're there for every bit of
Yeah.
it. You're there
Yeah.
for the inception, you're there all the way through the mix down, and finally it's out in the public, and you've heard it probably realistically, maybe 200 or more times. And so you become a little bit numb to it. And this song, when it was finished, and I listened to it in its entirety. It so moved me. It was really incredible because at that point I'm usually completely numb to the music, and I think so from that perspective, I feel like Cathy did an incredible job capturing an emotion in the studio, which is not an easy thing to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Because it's a very clinical environment, and she just did an amazing job. And John Bronson did an incredible job with the guitars. They
Yeah.
really added just an incredible element to the song. And David Ellefson just did an incredible job on the bass. And to be honest, Dave's a really good friend of mine, and we've known each other, probably for over 30 years. Megadeth actually opened for Alice Cooper when I was touring with Alice Cooper, and Dave. That's where Dave and I first met. And so I've known him all this time, and when I talked to him, I was like, yeah, we're kind of looking for sort of a Geddy Lee inspired, bass track. Can you do that? I didn't even know if he could do that.
Right.
And he goes, yeah, I'll play with my fingers. It's going to be great. And it was fantastic. He did an amazing job. So it's really cool for him. Everybody knows him from Megadeth, and they sold 20 million albums. So everybody, he's very famous for doing a certain thing. And then on this song, he really had a chance to kind of cut loose and do something completely different, which was, again, I've known him all these years. I wasn't even sure if he could do that. And he did an amazing job on it.
Oh, amazing. So the lyrics, the music, the video, all together is such a cathartic experience. I mean, I'm watching it again and again, and then feeling new things every time I watch. It's just amazing. I'm so excited. There'll, of course, be a link to the video in the show notes. So, Cathy, the lyrics were an ode to Neil, but they were also an ode to your nephew, Christian. And so you
Correct.
dedicated the to both of them, right?
Yeah, and there was a strange connection with that, which is how I tied the two together. Neil, of course, Rush fans know, Neil lost his daughter, his first daughter, in a car accident when she was 19. And he wrote his book Ghostwriter about that, about how he was either going to sit in his house and probably kill himself, or he was going to get out, and for him what was healing was to get out on his motorcycle and ride. That's what Neil loved to do. And so he wrote about his travels, and in the process of the motion of moving forward, he talked about how his little baby soul had to learn to live again. And that just really resonated with me, because I read the book because my brother had lost his son in a very similar car accident where there was no other, passengers or anything involved, and just a really tragic thing. And his son was only 18, and that was my nephew, and he was just a great kid. And so when something like that happens, you're at a loss for words. Nothing seems appropriate. You don't know how to bring it up, if you should bring it up. And I'm just, I don't know that anybody's great with that stuff, but I'm just really not good with that stuff.
Yeah.
And I love my brother, but I didn't know how to talk to him about it, or if I should. And we really didn't talk about it. And so there came a time, I think in the second or third year, which was probably the hardest year. And it's because when all the condolences and the funeral is over and everybody goes back to their normal life, that person is then sitting there saying, well, you're all moving on and going back to life as usual. I'm still stuck here with this void. And so I saw that in my brother, and that I gave him the book Ghostwriter to help him kind of get some insight. And one of the really interesting things was, Neil talked about the motion of the wheels when he would ride his motorcycle, and my brother had taken up mountain biking, and
Oh,
it was the same kind of thing. And so it was just my way of kind of trying to connect to my brother and relate to what he was going through, and sort of open that door of communication. And it did. But we still kind of, it still never really would bring it up too much until I was in the process of writing this song. And that was the first time that I actually emailed my brother, and I said, I've got this song and I wanted to get his permission because it's his story.
yeah.
And I wanted to get his permission, make sure I didn't talk about anything he didn't want out there or whatever. And he was so gracious and he loved the idea. He loved, and that surprised me. I didn't know how he was going to respond. And since then, it's really opened the door to everyone in my family being able to talk more openly about it. Because what we found out is my brother's at a point now, it's been years. He wants to talk about Christian. He wants to remember him. He wants to know that we haven't forgotten him. And so this ended up being um, a really great tribute to his son that made him feel like he's still here and we're still remembering him and we're still saying his name and people aren't just forgetting. And so that was a really important piece of this. And that's been worth everything
Yeah.
just to know that my brother felt that way. So
Wow, absolutely amazing. And so the song was released, I think it was October 29th, right?
yep.
2024 as well. So I imagine how's the reception been as this has moved its way into the world?
It has been amazing. So October 29th we picked because that's the anniversary of Exit Stage Left. So, some Rush fans picked up on that. And we did some artwork that is sort of a take off of that album cover, which is one of my favorites. And this response has been amazing. I hoped that people would connect to the actual story and the heart of it, but you just don't know. And especially with something that's such a heavy subject, you don't know how people are going to react. And what I found out is that so many people are going through similar things in their life, losing a loved one. It could be losing a relationship, but people are connecting to that emotion. And what I love is people are actually sharing their own stories with me. I've been getting messages and people commenting on the video and, saying they were brought to tears and they lost somebody recently. So I think that's what I love the most is it's making other people connect and they're sharing things back with me. And boy, we almost did cut that ending, and I am so glad we didn't because I can't imagine this song without it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really adds an extra layer, an extra element to it, and it's its own thing, but you know what the nod is to, which
Yeah.
it's genius in that aspect as well.
Yeah. And then that was Ken. Ken really came up with that whole basic ending and we just added to it, but it was brilliant.
Yeah, so so
You guys will be getting your PayPals any minute now.
so
I
$20 a
owe
piece
him
for
my
that comment.
life.
so I trust this was a worthwhile collaboration. It was something that you both benefited from, even intrinsically as you were working on the project. So and I hate asking this because this just released, it just dropped, it's just available to the world, and then there's the inevitable question: what are you guys working on next?
We do get that inevitable question. Ken, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, we're actually working on another song right now. I think it's kind of tough because usually when you're a band, you're working on maybe a full record, and in this instance, we really worked on that track, and now people are saying like, is there an album? Is there an EP? Is there another song? And you're like, yeah, sure, there's another song. So we put so much into this song, and
Yeah.
it's so great to hear people call it, a masterpiece or and all of these nice things I mean, it's so awesome, and we're very thankful that people are saying that. But that puts the pressure on you for the next song, where you go like, okay, you did this, and everybody
Yeah.
loves it. What are you going to do next? So we do feel that pressure and we want to make sure that it's right, but we are working on another song currently, and we'll see what happens from there.
You're working
Yeah.
on it gracefully under pressure?
I don't know. I don't think we're working quite as gracefully under pressure as they did, but
I
we'll
don't,
find out.
I told Ken it's like he's trapped in quicksand now and he can't get out.
Right.
And I did, like I said, I had sent him other stuff, so I had other stuff written, but he brings up a great point. The hard thing with a song like this is this song is one of those things where just everything magically happened with it, and it's so unique and it has that whole story behind it. it's going to be impossible to come up whatever we come up with is not going to be that song. It's going to be different, but you hope that you can show a different side of yourself and explore something else musically in the same vein, but just hopefully people understand that was a lightning strikes, kind of thing.
Well, and it's almost a song with a mission. You know what I mean? And I think that's the one thing that I think really makes the song unique. And that was actually one of the main reasons why I really wanted to get involved with this particular song. First, obviously, I'm a huge Rush fan and love Neil. I mean, he was, in my opinion, one of the top 3 influential drummers of all time. So that was a kind of like a no-brainer. But on the flip side, when you try to, you think, okay, the next song, is there going to be a mission like this? And I don't know if it's possible to have a mission like this song had. So it's going to be interesting to see what we come up with.
Yeah.
Yeah. No pressure. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all.
No pressure. In the meantime, though, people who love the song and want to support it, I'm a big fan of wanting to support artists and creative types. Are there ways that that we, the listeners who love the song, can support you guys? Because I was looking for, can I purchase it somewhere? How do I get money to the people who deserve it for all the incredible hard work they put into it?
Oh, that's another great question. Things are so different for artists, and Ken can speak to this as well. These days, it's just so different, especially somebody like, I mean, Ken's been in the business forever, and I've learned so much from him. But I'm new to original music. And so this being my first time out, I am learning how the business side of it works. And it's tough. You don't make money. Spotify pays artists next to nothing, but you need the downloads. So you want people to go download the song, subscribe, put it on playlists. Those are all really important things. And merchandise, and that's why we came up with Deco Entertainment, by the way, is an independent record company label, and they jumped on board with this song too, which was really great of them. They really believed in it, and they took a chance because I'm an unknown new artist, and they really got behind it, and they came up with this autographed flat we did of the Exit Stage Left sort of artwork that we did, and they're selling that. They're selling a t-shirt, which I keep joking about with Ken. They have a Cathy Rankin t-shirt. I'm like, who's gonna buy that?
Well,
I'm wearing it at the
one,
Bubba Bash.
so there you
bet I
go.
will.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not gonna wear my own t-shirt. That's where I draw the line.
No, I'm gonna wear it. I'll wear it.
Okay, you wear it. I'll get
I'm
you.
gonna wear one. Actually, I'm getting one. I'm gonna wear it.
There you go.
So yeah, if you want to buy the autograph flat, the t-shirt, that all really helps us to justify doing the second song. But it's tough out there for artists. So if people can subscribe and download, and not just on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, we're on all the platforms, but that's important. It doesn't really, doesn't make people much money, but it's important in kind of building that fan base.
Okay, awesome. Well, I will share links to all those things in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to chat with me. It was so much fun. Can you guys please let my listeners know where they can find out more about each of you online?
Ken, where you give your socials first?
Sure. Just Ken K. Mary will be on Facebook and Instagram. I think it's Ken K. Mary Official on Instagram. That shows you how much I pay attention to my socials. But and then Ken Mary 1, I think, on Facebook as well. That's my personal page. And I do have a YouTube channel that I won't say I just started it, but I'm going to begin actually loading things up to it shortly. So that is Ken K. Mary Official as well. So those are my socials.
Thank you. Cathy?
Yeah, get on Ken's YouTube channel because I know some of the stuff he's working on, and it's going to be worth following.
Awesome. How about you, Cathy? What about your URLs, etc.?
Oh boy, on Instagram I'm at Rush Fanatic. That tells you how obsessed a fan I am. And then on Facebook, my public page is Cathy Rankin Entertainment, I believe, and my personal page is I think just Cathy Rankin, but the public page, you're unlimited in how many followers you can have. So that's the better one to follow. And then on YouTube, I believe it's under Cathy Rankin Entertainment, or you can just search my name, I think, and it comes up.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks again so much for hanging out with me today.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And I look forward to seeing you at Bubba Bash.